costs money to have the right to drive through the centre of London. Car owners must pay the congestion charge, the famous traffic jam busting tax, levied thanks to a vast network of cameras. But there is a way to escape this tax, by driving clean, by using electric cars, for example. In London, you can see them popping up all over the place. Andy has one. Every morning, this businessman goes to his office in the heart of London, behind the wheel of his little G-Whiz.
I used to drive my Mercedes up to London. I had to pay congestion charge. I had to pay £35 of parking every day. This car, I have no problems with speed cameras, parking wardens, congestion charge. I have a big car which I use at weekends, which is fine, and that I'm very comfortable with that. But it does mean that I don't use a big car during the week, which is the majority of the driving.
The clean vehicles are rewarded, and the polluting ones, those which release the most carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, are punished. Polluters pay. As soon as next year, the congestion charge should be multiplied by 3 for big engines, 4x4s for example, as well as sports cars and luxury cars. £25 sterling on weekdays. That's nearly €40. The tariffs considered by London City Hall are a deliberate deterrent.
There will still be people who don't like the idea of paying £25. Our message to them would be there are different choices for them. They can switch to public transport, they can switch to a lower emitting car. This is about sending a signal and trying to encourage people to think more about the impact of their individual choices on the environment.
Has the message gotten through? There are some owners of big cars who are already resigned to the idea of paying more to drive through London.
I will still pay it just because it seems the way to do it, and if I'm driving a Rolls Royce, then surely I can afford it.
There are others, though, such as this mother come to pick up her son at the French Lycée in London, for whom the price tag is not nearly as affordable.
If we continue to drive SUVs, we'll be penalised heavily. I'm going to change cars. There's no way I'm going to pay £25 a day. Already £8 is enormous.
The urban toll, introduced in 2003, has already had a positive effect on the environment, thanks to a 20% decrease in traffic in the centre of London. For City Hall, the new tariffs will allow for less congestion in the British capital, whether one is driving or simply breathing.
In general, I think it sounds like a good idea. There's so much congestion in major cities. I'm all for any way to reduce congestion. Although my hesitation is, does it really work? You know, is it practical for everybody to move to electric cars, which are generally more expensive to manufacture?
It's a very nice propaganda from the British government. It sent out clear message that they want to tax you for, or they want to punish you for driving polluted vehicles. And yeah, I think the message was pretty clear.
I think that's pretty interesting, actually. It's I've never heard of that situation before. So, I mean, it was kind of I don't know how much money that would be to us. It sounds like probably like $10 or something per day, $20. Yeah, it struck me as an interesting solution. I mean, London's a really busy town.
I thought it was interesting. My take on it was that they were initially trying to combat the traffic congestion in London, and a byproduct of that is having the benefit of forcing people to be more green if they can't afford the, I guess, penalties, the tariffs for owning a car and driving during the week. I think that it could be helpful if you were using it the right way. I know here we have Smart Car. Is that what it? Zipcar. And so I think making that more widely available would be really useful. But I think if you're going to encourage people to use public transportation and then just have wheels when you want them, that you shouldn't be penalizing those people when they're driving the Zipcars. You know, this is the first city that I've been in when I've solely relied on public transportation, so I don't really know what effect that would have, because also I have budgetary constraints, so driving for me isn't really an option here.
In big cities? I hope so, but I think the environment is a little different compared to the place where I come from, because US, most of the people in U.S. own a car and they drive. The car is part of their life. So I think it will have a little resistance.
It really depends. I feel like if that is implemented in DC, I feel like a lot of companies would take the cost for their employees, and so I don't think it will be as effective here in DC as compared to other cities.
I have my hesitations on where it would work. There might be a handful of cities where it could work. New York City potentially could work. Converting taxis to electrics might be a way to start. But I doubt in places like California or Texas or any of those areas you're going to get much buy-in, and I think people are going to be willing to pay some taxes on that. And I think the subsidies that people are giving out are going to end up being a bit of a waste.
Would if depending on the price of the congestion tax, I guess if it's too low, I wouldn't really bother. But at some amount, I'm definitely gonna think about it and not drive into Center City as often as I would. For Americans, I feel like more than penalties, they need to see the benefit of this. So if you advertise more about the green environment and how this has positive effects, I think it might work in the U.S. as well, because I think Americans are more for seeing the benefits rather than being punished for something.
After several generations of the technology, I think it could start changing it. So, I think younger generations today are already thinking that way. I think it's a long process, but again, assuming the technology can begin catching up and the perceived price of having the V8 continues to go up. I think it could start changing those perceptions, but as of now, oil and gasoline is still cheap, and in the States it's very cheap, and there's no reason to move over until electric cars become as cheap, rather than the other way where we're trying to put penalties on people who are driving.
I don't think so. I think part of what we have here in America is that the land is so widespread and we have urban sprawl that people have the opportunity to use their cars. And I think that's what you're seeing too, is most metro areas that are very condensed in population rely more heavily on public transportation, and the public transportation is better. So until there's the incentive or penalty to use public transportation, that people will tend to gravitate towards having their own cars. And Americans are very much into individualism, having my own space, having things that define us, and cars plays into that. Having a car that identifies who you are, what market segment you are. Are you affluent? What kind of car do you drive? Until we as a society move away from that, I think that we'll still gravitate towards driving cars.
Yeah, it's going to affect the poor people who have to drive to work in areas like Southeast or go out of the Beltway and all that stuff. Like people, this isn't. I don't think the congestion is going to be solved. You're just going to be affecting people who drive cars that are older and less fuel efficient, and they're going to have to go to work, and they're probably going to have to drive there. They may be far away from their house, and they're going to get taxed for it while everybody else kind of just absorbs the pain or gets a more expensive hybrid. That's the way I see it.
Similar concept of this kind of tax in Korea, especially in Seoul. Seoul is a very big city, and during rush hours, the city prohibits cars coming in by levying taxes to those cars. Well, Seoul has three tunnels that that is linked with the outer part of the city, and during in the morning 6 to 9, and during rush hour after the work around 5 to 7, the government controls the cars from coming in by, I think it was about $2.5 per what do you call that? Per vehicle thing. I do support this because I think it's a good thing to do for the environment and for the congestion, but on the condition that the government provides full support of the mass transportation to the citizens. If they do that, I don't see why I object to this tax or regulation. Well, I think most of the people will agree with the concept because Seoul is a very congested city and it's very polluted as well.
Like Koreans use too much automobiles. It's such a small country, but yet people are so used to driving everywhere and anywhere. I feel like some kind of tax might have a positive effect, but at the same time, having about a quarter of the population living within Seoul, I also feel that it's not going to be easy at all to implement that kind of tax. I think initial responses are very similar to Americans, but over time, Koreans will complain, but they'll also take it in as well at the same time compared to the Americans, whereas I think Americans will be opposing till the end.
Well, it depends. Like, for big cities, we have like pretty nice metro system, and for big cities like in Taipei, we have good bus system. But I mean, for other rural areas, well, we don't have that many cars. What we have is motorcycles. I think they're already like tax that applies to motorcycles or the pollution fee or whatever. But I don't know, the context is a little different. I don't think this is going to work in Taiwan. It's not going to pass the legislative grant. It's not going to pass.
And there's more, because as the country becomes more and more crowded and the environmentalists become more and more noisy, it makes more and more sense than ever to have a small car.
There are lots to choose from. I've got a selection here, Volkswagen Polo, Suzuki Swift, quite nice actually, and the Citroën C1. The trouble is, none of these cars are really small. They are, in fact, massive. 40 years ago, car makers could sell you something much smaller. The original Mini, for example, or the bubble car. But even these aren't small. Not really. Not compared to this. The Peel P50. That is 54 inches long and 41 inches wide. It is listed in the Guinness Book of Records as the smallest production car ever.